Okay, well, we got some wild riding today on the bus. This is a complex and highly symbolic chapter. And I've learned things even this week that gave me a better understanding of what's going on here, and I hope I can relay that. I pray that I can make it understandable to y'all like it has come to me. So, first of all, next week, Labor Day weekend, my family and I are traveling. I won't be here next Sunday. And if one of y'all want to lead the class, let me know, and I'll make sure that everybody knows to be here next Sunday. If not, then I guess we'll take a Sunday off. You don't have to teach Revelation if you decide to do a class next week. Okay, we are between the seventh trumpet and the first bowl or the first vial. So we're in this, in terms of the sequence of Revelation, we're kind of in a holding pattern. We're not moving forward in terms of the sequence. We're being given some information, background kind of information, kind of a foundation for some of the things that are in process and that are going to happen. In chapter 12, we introduced the woman, the nation of Israel, the lineage of Jesus Christ, his appearance in the earth, his resurrection and his ascension, and Satan's war in heaven against God, which he lost and was cast out. So this is a whole lot of, wide-ranging history that John is being given in the midst of the book of Revelation. And this chapter gives us another good understanding of what's to come. So the last verses of 12 was, so the dragon was furious with the woman and went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep the commands of God and hold firmly to the testimony about Jesus. The dragon stood on the sand of the sea. So that's where we ended chapter 12. The dragon, Satan, he's mad. He got thrown out of heaven. He lost the war. It's not looking good for his future, and he knows it. And now he is ready to take vengeance on only those who he can, which are the people on earth, which are God's people, the people that still love God. He wants revenge against God, and they are going to be the target of his revenge. Her offspring, that's questionable. There's different opinions depending on which camp you're in. For sure, there's the 144,000 who are from the tribes of Israel. So they are Jews, but they're also Christians because they have been saved. If you believe in the rapture, then the church is not here. If you believe there's not going to be a rapture, then the offspring would include the church. And you have a group of new saints, those who have become saved during the tribulation. So those are the targets of his revenge. So we start with verse 1. And I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads. On its horns were 10 crowns, and on its heads were blasphemous names. But most everybody agrees that the sea here is symbolic. What it symbolizes is debatable. there's more than one understanding. But this is not Satan. This is not the dragon. This is a new beast on the scene. Someone else is entering the play, another character, and this one is a beast. In chapter 11:7, we heard that the words when they finish their testimony, the beast that comes up out of the abyss will make war on them, conquer them, and kill them. I think that the sea can be considered another name for the abyss, because we know that's where beasts come from at some points in time. In chapter 17:8, it says, the beast that you saw was and is not and is about to come up from the abyss and go to destruction. So we have two references in Revelation where beasts have come out of an abyss. But in Daniel, go back to Daniel in chapter 7:3, the four beasts, four great beasts, each different from the others, came up out of the sea. So this term out of the sea, out of the abyss, I think it can be interchangeable, but I found references, some even go so symbolic as to think that the sea means just a sea of people out of the Gentile world, out of the world of the people around the Mediterranean Sea. Out of that sea of people, the beast rises up. The more literal interpretation is if you were on the shores of Israel and ships came from Rome, it would appear that the ships rose out of the sea as they come closer to you from the horizon. So you can say, the beast's ships are upon us. So there's more than one ways to take this. I don't think it matters. I think we are going to find out who the beast is and what his purpose is and what he's going to do. So whether you think of it as coming out of the sea or the abyss or the whatever, I don't think that's important to the overall lesson.
What about all the turbulence and all the conflict and everything taking place in the world and rising up out of that?
That's another.
The sea and the flood have that same imagery of chaos and disorder.
Yeah, he's that, he's they're sure stand out about all that.
And I read somewhere that the Israelites at that time, they didn't necessarily like the sea. The sea was a dangerous place. Bad storms came from there. And if you went out there, there was a big chance you wouldn't make it back. Remember Paul, on his journeys, got shipwrecked and ended up stranded. So it wasn't a safe place to go out there. So it's a dark, evil, dangerous place. Well, the beast came from that. So however you look at it.
Can I throw something in here?
Sure.
As you look at this imagery, one important thing I think to keep in mind biblically, whatever side you come down on, it ends up being time placement. I mean, Revelation is all about time placement, and you'll come up with different opinions and conclusions based on how you place these events when they're happening. But what I was getting at, as we look at some of these things, we try to figure out here, there's specific meaning in the book of Revelations. He's driving to specific meaning, but he's drawing from very broad context, historic context, biblical context is very broad, bringing it to a point. At the end, he says a human number, 666. He narrows it to a point. Who is this beast? But if you look at the broad context of the beast, where do we have it biblically? The bulls of Bashan have surrounded me. The Nebuchadnezzar became as a beast. For 7 years, he was cast out, remember?
Even because that's one of the eat grass.
Yes. Lion-like men who fought on the side of David. The imagery of beast is everywhere in the Old Testament. And always, at least we can say, talks about the base nature of man and the sinful nature of man. So it's just something to kind of keep in mind as it goes to specific events. You're going to see a lot of this broad context, the peoples, the nations, the seas, the islands. That's 70 in Genesis, after Babel, all those nations. There's just a lot of stuff coming together. So you can get all of these.
As imagery there, the lion like men was this mighty man.
Right.
Wasn't it?
Power.
Mhm. Power.
So as you're trying to bring things to a specific context, you're picking up on a lot of aspects. I'm just saying there's some room for, you can see why people go different directions.
Sure.
Because this stuff
Yeah.
is coming from a vast amount of imagery. That's all I'm saying.
Yep,
Mhm.
you're right.
There's a lot of, I see them, there's a lot of small pictures. And there's a bigger picture. And we probably don't even get to the bigger picture, but these things tie together. These can tie together, and two or three things can actually be another picture. Two or three things, and I think it's all going, when it happens, it'll all come together. Well, that's what that meant.
Yeah, and there's a deeper level of symbology going on here too, and I'll try to bring that out as we go through this. But if you compare the description of the dragon, Satan, out of chapter 12, in verse 3, with 7 heads and 10 horns and 7 crowns, this beast coming out of the sea is a different beast, but it's in the image of the dragon, the Satan. Just as we are creations in the image of God, this beast is in the image of Satan. And we will find later that we will find a trinity
Yeah.
of Satan,
Yeah.
the beast who is the Antichrist,
Spirit of
and
the
another
Antichrist.
beast who is the false prophet.
Yeah, there's spirit of the Antichrist and his false prophet. Third one.
Yes, so now we see in chapter 13, we see all these things becoming visible in direct wording. So now this beast also closely resembles Daniel's 4 beasts in chapter 7, combined into one. The 4 beasts of the lion and the leopard and the bear is now one beast through the description in Daniel 7:24. The 10 horns. Now this is the interpretation given to Daniel by the Lord of his vision. The Lord described the beast. The 10 horns are 10 kings who will rise from this kingdom. Another king, different from the previous ones, will rise after them and subdue 3 kings. So we get a clue as to what are the kings, what are the horns, what do they stand for? And the horns wore the crowns. You would normally think the crowns would be on the head, but the crowns are on the horns because the horns are the rulers. The heads are nations. The blasphemous names of this beast align well with how Daniel described the blasphemies that were spewed from the beast that he saw. Okay, so verse 2. The beast I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. The dragon gave the beast his power, his throne, and great authority. So again, this ties in to the same vision that Daniel saw. So we have a lot of imagery, but we have repeating, consistent, parallel imagery. It's not just random. It's not just all over the place. It's focused, even though it's symbolic. It's focused in a way that it would be hard to deny that they weren't, parallel, that they weren't connected in some way. Satan, the dragon, gives the Antichrist authority. Where did Satan get the authority? From God. God gave him authority over the earth. In Luke 4:5, so he took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time. The devil said to him, I will give you their splendor and all this authority because it has been given over to me and I can give it to anyone I want. Satan would have been happy if Jesus would have become his Antichrist. But of course, Jesus wouldn't never consider it. But Satan offered it to him. And now he is offering it to the Antichrist beast that's coming up out of the sea. So he found an alternate. He found someone else to invest his authority in.
And Antichrist could be somebody that's mean as a beast.
Good.
It could be somebody that's just terrible, mean like a beast. And he gives that power to.
Yeah, and see that, you know, I think that's where we get, not what you said, but what you said brings it up. People want to, okay, find the Antichrist. Okay,
In the tail.
let's make a movie about the Antichrist. Okay, let's find a character and he should be real mean. He should be, you know. Some other people say, no, he would be trickier than that. Satan is deceptive. Satan would find somebody that looks pretty, that could bring in an audience that, you know, millions of people would clap and applaud. So he has to be
I
attractive.
think he's there now. He's trying to trap us now. When this time comes, it's gonna be a different story. Maybe, you know, I'm just a conversation.
Well, I've got scripture that says he will, that he is, that we have him now.
Yeah, now,
And I'll try to explain that when we get to it. But the point is that Satan has picked this person, this human being with a number. It's not just random, it's a particular person. Now, the movies, you know, Rosemary's Baby, you know, people trying to find somebody with a symbol, you know, oh yeah, I see that 666 right there behind his ear. That's all make-believe, right? You know, and it's okay to speculate, but that's not something we can find in the scripture. So Satan now has a representative on earth. Verse 3. One of its heads appeared to be fatally wounded, but its fatal wound was healed. The whole earth was amazed and followed the beast. So this is a charismatic person. If they're not pretty, most charismatic people are pretty at some level or another. But he's somebody that wants to be followed, wants to lead people, and they want to follow him. Now again, this is one of the, I think, most abused references in Revelation, because you can see movies and books and with all kinds of interpretation about somebody with, you know, been shot, assassinated, but then they come back to life, or somebody who was executed and then came back to life. And there's multiple interpretations, so I'm not going to say who's right and who's wrong, which ones. But when I was a boy, that was the main thing. Yeah, somebody shot somebody, or who was the Russian leader that had the scar on his forehead? Yeah, Gorbachev. You know, everybody thought, oh, that's him. You can see that scar right there on his head. That must be the Antichrist. The best interpretation that I saw, if you think about what this head, one of its heads were fatally wounded. Remember what the head stands for. Not the ruler, it stands for the nation. I think it's a nation that becomes conquered. A nation that collapses financially or socially or militarily is conquered and then rises back up again. So it's not necessarily a person. It could be a governmental group, a political group, a social group that is almost wiped out and then comes back to power. Some people go way symbolic. This is talking about how idolatry perished. People don't buy wooden idols to worship and pray to nowadays. That's gone away with. Now the idol's been replaced by materialism. That's the new. So you can go way symbolic. It doesn't even refer to men or nations, but total symbolism. The Catholic Church. Some people say it was the Catholic Church. They became way too powerful and way too overbearing, and they were taken down and almost destroyed. But then they have now reached back up again as a major religious power.
They just an opinion. I do think this chapter is leading to a specific person and a specific event. But that aside, if you took Revelation out of the Bible and all you knew was the rest of Scripture, you would be in the dark quite a bit when it comes to the spiritual realm. Because all you would have is Job, you would have Genesis events, you would have Daniel and,
A little bit of Psalms.
yeah, a little bit, and a little bit of Isaiah and Ezekiel. You'd have a little bit there. But here in Revelation, the spiritual realm is open like nowhere else in scripture. So I don't think it's wrong to say that although this is probably leading to a specific event, how could we use a spiritual principle from it? This is going to be true in all times of history. Satan always has someone he's using, some power he's using, some authority. And we see it today in our times.
Yeah, and hopefully we'll get there, because I've got the scriptures that support exactly what you're saying. It's empty. Okay, where did I read?
In verse 4. Oh, I'm sorry, you were in 3.
Okay,
3, yeah.
verse 4. Verse 4,
Verse 3?
Huh?
Verse 3?
3. One
You
that's
did.
here, it's.
Verse 3 is where he's at.
Okay, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, verse 4, they worship the dragon because he gave authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war against it? So we have Satan, who has now created the earthly representative, the guy to stand up in front of him and say, yay for Satan, yay for the guy who put me in power. And the world is worshiping the Antichrist, who gives the glory of his authority to Satan. The evil of the world is now out in visible sight. It's no longer Satan working behind the shadows and in the underlying currents of society. He's out in the open. He is making himself visible. Who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war against it? Well, of course, we know it's God. But these people have lost sight of God. They don't know God exists.
I don't understand how somebody could even think like that. I'm glad I'm there.
Because
I'm glad I'm there.
you're a Christian.
I don't understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But they are people like that. I
But
mean,
look at the world.
It's like that.
That
Well, look at Paul.
that almost makes
Look
me
at
cry.
Saul before he got saved. He thought he was doing what he was supposed to, so it's not,
Yeah, but he wasn't worshiping Satan. Like these,
but I'm just, my point is
yeah, I
deception.
understand here.
Yeah, deception.
Among sinners, he was chief, he said.
Yeah, to this point, Satan has always had to work behind the scenes through deception, through leading people by confusing people,
Deceiving people.
by deceiving people. He's never stood up and said, okay, I am Satan, bow down and worship me, because if he did that today, most people would say, well, I wasn't going to get religious, but I'm not following that guy.
He hasn't
So-
fully revealed himself.
And there's
To
The-
people, to
what
me.
we have now is a single ruler. In other words, all authority of Satan has been vested in this Antichrist, which means he is now the ruler of the world, the entire world, all the world, not most of the world, not the known world, but it's going to say that he is ruler of all the world. But now who is able to wage war against it? That should be said about God, not Satan, because we know that there is a God and he can easily defeat the devil, and he will. Verse 5, the beast was given a mouth to utter boasts and blasphemies. It was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. There's our 42 months again, 3.5 years. The second, I think, most people think the second half of the Great Tribulation is what we're talking about here.
Before you go there.
Okay.
I was just reminded of how quickly some bit of amazement wears off. So you got all the Hebrew children that are brought out by God, pillar of fire, parted the sea, and now we've got 40 days that we're waiting for somebody to come back, and we already need a substitute.
Yeah.
So this isn't surprising to me in that way, going, man, look how quick we can flip to, this is the God we worship. This is the one who has brought us out. So I'm not surprised when something amazing has happened and everybody goes after it. So,
That's what they see.
yeah, it's like, well, that was what it was. It was this. Look at it. And here's the system, or here's what we follow,
From Hosanna's in
He
the
goes by
highest
the
to
dragon.
crucify me.
whatever. So,
Mhm.
so I'm not surprised that this quick tempo of change happens and everybody goes after it.
Yeah, and we were warned exactly about this in multiple scriptures, which we will get into. But this last 42 months, Satan knows, Satan is not at all ignorant or stupid. He was kicked out of heaven. He knows the timeline. He knows the Bible. He knows 42 months, just like we all do. So he knows when the clock started. So his time is short. He is down to the last 3.5 years, and he knows it. And he is going to put a last push to try to succeed and get all he can get while he can get it. But the countdown clock is going. Okay, verse 6. It began to speak blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his dwelling, those who dwell in heaven. And it was permitted to wage war against the saints and to conquer them. Conquer them. Not persecute them, but to conquer them. It was also given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. As far as I know, there's no place in history that there has ever been a single ruler who had full and total authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation on earth. It's never happened yet. You can say large parts of it. You can say the Middle East. You can say the known world. You can say most societies, but when you include Asia and Indonesia and the South Pacific Islands and Iceland and Greenland, and there are parts of the world that if this guy's in charge of all nations in the world, I don't see any history where it's happened yet. So that's a futurist point of argument.
Yeah.
There's been an effort toward this though, for many,
Oh, sure. Many
trying to
tribes.
go towards it.
Well, we want it in people now with all the technology. Because we're not a individual country anymore.
Right.
We are one world.
It's a global.
It's a global thing.
That's where it's headed. That's what it is now. Yeah,
And there's a push for globalism,
absolutely.
but we haven't invested authority in the
No.
United Nations yet.
No.
You can't get a car.
No,
But I'm saying it's gonna be so much easier now
Yes.
because of the technology.
Exactly. Exactly, I agree. And he is coming against the Christians. He wants revenge. Those who still worship God and are not worshiping him needs to die. That's just his plan. And he's got 3.5 years to do it, and he's going to try to succeed.
He's just going after all the people that are asleep from God,
And
correct?
say again,
I said, he's going after all the people that are asleep from God. Like, the people who are not awake.
exactly.
As-
And he calls them out here. in the
as
few
well as
verses.
the very elect.
Yeah.
To me, his goal
Is it possible?
is not winning the war. His goal is taking as many eternal beings that are made in the image of God with him, because he knows he's not winning the war. To me, his goal is taking as many people.
And if they already belong to God, then he hates them and he
That's-
wants to
that's
kill
the-
them.
That's his supreme target.
But he also doesn't want the sleeping people to be woke up.
That's right.
He wants them to lose by default.
That's right.
Okay, we go to 2 Thessalonians 2 and 4. It reads, he opposes and exalts himself above every so-called God or object of worship, so that he sits in God's temple proclaiming that he himself is God. This is the Antichrist. In 1 John 4, and here we get to the spirit that Tommy was talking about. Dear friends, do not believe every spirit, but test the spirits to see if they are from God, because many false prophets have gone out into the world. Many, not just one, many. This is how you know the Spirit of God. Every spirit that confesses Jesus Christ has come in the flesh is from God. But every spirit that does not confess Jesus is not from God. This is the spirit of the Antichrist, which you have heard is coming, and even now it is already in the world. The spirit of Antichrist has been here for thousands of years, and it is growing. It is getting stronger, and I have no doubt that in my lifetime, I've seen the spirit of Antichrist grow to a mighty tree from a small twig. It's evident in all of our systems. The Antichrist spirit is in our schools, it's in our government, it's in our courts, it's in our corporations, it's
Yes,
everywhere.
it is.
It's in our music, it's in our
It's in
movies,
everything.
everything.
So the spirit of Antichrist has been among us for a long time, and there's been multiple iterations of people who, just like there's been people who wants to rule the entire earth, I believe there's people who wants to be the Antichrist. And I believe Satan has enabled and supported various people at various times. I think he's always had somebody on earth that he gave authority and power to do all kinds of missions. And the 70 AD, there's no doubt in my mind that the person who was doing that was doing it in part because of being enabled by Satan.
Workers of iniquity.
So the spirit of Antichrist is what we're dealing with. And stop here, but just this week, Oklahoma's law starts next week. We have now outlawed abortion. 10-year felony, 10 years in prison, $100,000 fine if you do an abortion in Oklahoma, except for the life of the mother. Only exception. A doctor to perform an abortion has to state and prove that it was either the life of the mother or the child. Otherwise, it's a felony, and you're going to prison. That's the strongest anti-abortion law in the United States. Some people may not agree with that. But if you look at it as murder, then what other exceptions do we allow for other murder? If any one of us murders any other one of us, it's a felony.
Yeah.
If you murder a baby that doesn't have a chance to be born, then it's murder, and the consequences should be equal to murder. Oklahoma schools, Mustang, losing their accreditation because they refuse to not teach racism to kids in school. They had a teacher who was, no matter how you evaluate it, was teaching racism, and they lost their accreditation. Tulsa schools lost their accreditation. Multiple schools, including Norman, were threatened with probation because they labeled bathrooms bathroom and opened it up to girls and boys to use the same bathroom in schools in Norman, Oklahoma. That's the administration of the schools. That's their policy. Well, the state wrote a law that says you can't do that. You have to have boys and girls, and the right people have to go to those.
Praise
And
the Lord.
they had to force them with threats of withholding money from them to get them to comply with the state law that was written to keep them from doing it. The spirit of the Antichrist is fighting this cultural war, the
Mhm, like
spiritual
nothing
war
ever.
among us, around us all the time, right now.
Right.
So not, forget the movie version of the Antichrist or Rosemary's Baby. We are in the world with the spirit of the Antichrist right now. And we're dealing with it. Disney Corporation last week threw out all the woke, liberal, executives up to the vice president level, multiple vice presidents, who led them down this channel of, we're gonna have gay characters in every show, every movie, every cartoon, we're gonna implement sex transvestites, we're gonna include, well, their stock went like this, their viewership went like this, and the stockholders said, hey, every one of those people that are leading us that direction, you're out of here. Fired them last week.
That was unbelievable.
So now Disney's going to go back to traditional family value material, and that's what they're going to concentrate on. For Warner Brothers, the same thing. This is a battle going on in many areas.
Yeah.
So,
Can I say one thing on that?
sure.
As we see this war coming to us here in Norman and in Moore, me and you discussed many things about what's going on in our actual communities. This is no longer crazy stuff that happens in California.
Right.
It's no longer crazy stuff that happens in New York.
It's the
We,
spirit.
we as Christians have to understand our stances and explain them compassionately to people. And help people see reason. Because we're going nuts.
We're not winning, we're against.
Where those people, where those people in
Hey,
those
y'all.
areas are moving into our areas.
Remember,
and trying to
remember
spread it
next
around.
week, we won't have a class.